but I want to recreate what I did just in case people are watching and want to see it. Or I might upload this to YouTube too, because the SDK is different in the Washington, D.C. release. And so there's some cool changes and I wanted to try them out and it was working. So let me dive right back into that. So first of all, I have this, I have VS Code open. It's my normal code editor that I use for everything. I've already created a folder for this scope already. So you'll see that I call this folder on my computer's Twitch scope test. I'm going to go back and forth between docs and stuff like that to show you this is actually what I had to do. I literally went into ServiceNow SDK, and that's what I searched for, and it was the first link. So going to the docs, this is where I was. And then I went to install the ServiceNow SDK. So what I had to do first was make sure you have node.js installed, and then it will install npm. And the main thing usually you need to know about this is, one, it's required to do the SDK. And then two, you want to use these to control everything about the SDK. And this is also opens the opportunity for you to do a lot of other stuff via your own local computer. And if you're wondering, oh, what is even an SDK? It's very useful if you are used to doing any development in software development in a traditional fashion. So for instance, like if you've coded a website or if you coded an app and you did it strictly from like a script editor or an IDE like this, a lot of people not in ServiceNow will be used to doing development this way. So it's even better to see that kind of process. And the SDK allows us to do that kind of work, that kind of process, directly in our editor instead of having to go to the ServiceNow interface. I feel more hacker man, you know? Anyways, so following the instructions, I opened this folder in VS Code specifically, and then I opened a terminal. So if you've never done that before, it's up here, view terminal. And then after you've installed the npm and node.js, then you could do this command npm install. And then these two dashes usually means like an option or an additional parameter that you're trying to give it. So I'm saying globally on my computer, I want to install the ServiceNow SDK. And when you press enter, it's going to do a bunch of stuff. And it's going to find all the different files it needs. It's going to figure out all the different things to make the SDK work and install those into your system so that you can start utilizing this software development kit. So I'm doing this in real time, so I'm going to wait for it to finish, and you'll see it goes through a bunch of stuff. Okay, so it's done. So it says no errors. It did some warnings, but that's all just applications. You can read through all this stuff. It's usually good to make sure you're knowing what's going on, especially if it says warn or error. We're going to take one step back, and I'm actually going to show how to authenticate into the SDK. So if you type in NOW SDK just by itself, you'll get this huge list of information about the SDK. They even have some ASCII art in here saying NOW SDK, but then a bunch of the commands that you're able to do. One of the main things you want to do first is authenticate to an instance. And so I already have one. So if I just say NOW SDK auth, it'll actually show you your available options for that. And I can show, I already created one, so I'll say auth list and show you that, yeah, I already have one for this, my Earlio instance for the username earl.duque. And I've given it an alias of Earlio, so I can easily call this authentication quickly by just saying Earlio whenever I need to. But if you didn't have one, the way to create a new one is that SDK auth save. And if you ever are wondering what exactly is entailed in one of these commands for the SDK, you can add this -help to it, and it'll describe to you what it does exactly, and like what optional parameters that you can add onto it, all that good stuff. And so to create a new one, I can just say now SDK. I'll follow the instructions for this one actually. Auth, save, and then it wants the alias, and I'll call this one able. I'll say able T. No, I'll say a tutor because that's the username I'm gonna connect it to. And then the username is able.tutor, and the host is the instance itself. So mine is https://berlio.service-now.com. What else do I need to put in here? Anything that, and I could put default equals false because I already have a different one, but I'm just going to leave it out because I don't need it. But if you're making one, your first one, you probably want to set default to true actually. So that will help you later in your configuration. But I'm going to leave this here, and you'll see that it's going to prompt me like, hey, okay, we know you are trying to log in as able tutor, but we need the password for able tutor. And I can type it out right now because you all can't see this. And then I'll press enter, and it's going to try to connect as able tutor. And look, so according to this, it's saying I successfully did, which is cool. And if I now SDK off list again, you'll see that I have two different aliases that I can use to run the SDK on a specific instance as a specific person. My default is Erlio, so I'm going to keep it like that one. But now we can go back to creating an app. So now SDK, and I'm trying to remember all the commands for it. What was it? Create. Okay. So create, project name, scope name, directory. And directory is optional if you're not in a folder already. So let's create a new app now. So now SDK, create, and it can't be capital letters, it said. So SN dev program test. Oh no, SN dev program SDK test. And then the app, the scope name itself, I'm going to call it the same thing, SN dev program SDK test. And add the interactive parameter on there. So it's trying to create it. It wants a description. I think I could have included that as a optional parameter right away. Live test of Washington SDK features. Build and register application on instance. Yes. Add a sample table to the application. Oh yeah, sure. Cannot destructure property instance URL of this session as it is undefined. Well, I think I needed to make sure I said what auth. Okay, so let's redo that. Live test of SDK and CLI in Washington. And then the auth will be my Erlio one. The interactive part is trying to help me right away. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it's because I forgot to leave off. I left off what my what alias I was trying to do this under. So now what it's doing, it's creating a bunch of stuff. It's creating the scope in the instance, it's creating the table in the instance, and it's also creating all the files that I need to run the SDK in conjunction with my instance. So it looks like it successfully created the instance, so let's actually check it out. I've never created a app via the SDK, so that was my first time. This is me doing it live, actually, so glad it worked. Okay, so let's check out if that scope was created. So let me refresh a little bit. Oh, there it is. Okay, SN dev program SDK test. That's the one. So if I open up that scope, it should have made me a table. It did. It made me a to-do table for testing. Okay. And to show you how the SDK works, I'm going to start a business role. And oh, it created one actually. Okay, so when I use the interactive one, and it created this business role for me, which is cool. And then like, oh, okay, so it structured it already. So this is interesting. So when you use the interactive one and you tell it to build a table for you, it actually creates the table and a sample business role with the new SDK function calling built into it. So I'll come back to this to show you what's happening. But notice that in my business rule, if you know regular ServiceNow development, if you go to the advanced tab, you will have a script in here. And this is where you would normally do stuff like current dot like to do and or state, and then set it to different things and manipulate the fields and all that kind of stuff. So that's the stuff that would normally be there. But instead, if you're using the SDK, you can just have this sitting there. And then now if I go back into VS Code, I can kind of talk through now what the structure is. So if you've ever done any source control for ServiceNow, you'll recognize some of this. So if you go to metadata update, you'll see all the files in your scope. And this one includes here's the table, and here's that SysScript. So if you don't know what a SysScript is, that's what we are looking at. Oh, where'd it go? Yeah, this is a SysScript. This is the business rule. That's what the business rule table is called, sys_script. So here it is, and I can even further demonstrate that's the same file by going to that here and saying, what's the sys ID of it? Here's the unique identifier for it. Ends with Delta Foxtrot 9 Foxtrot. If I go here, this one ends with Delta Foxtrot 9 Foxtrot. So it's the same file. And you'll notice that here, right here, the script is inputted in this XML file. First of all, it's all in XML files, right? And then the script is loaded into this specific script field for the XML file, surrounded by more wrappers, and then it's not JavaScript. So if it's not, since it's in an XML file, I don't have access to like IntelliSense or stuff like that. But if I wanted to, I could go in here and start adding more script in here and start doing stuff in here. But like nothing comes up when I do current. If I set a glide record, like it doesn't have anything. It doesn't know what to do with that. So it's not really pretty to edit in here. But instead, what it does is if you include this in your script fields anywhere in ServiceNow that has a script field, this is the structure for saying that I'm going to use my own file to run the SDK, to write code in. And so in that folder, where is it? Yeah, so in the source folder, in this sample app that it automatically created some of these sample ones, I have, it already created my function.js. And if you notice in here, it says, hey, I'm going to pull in the file myfunction.js. And if I look at myfunction.js, there is a function called show status update. And if I go back to ServiceNow, it's saying, hey, I'm bringing in show status update from the file myfunction.js, and I'm running it using current.getValue as the first parameter, and then previous.getValue as the second parameter. And now I'm in my own .js file, and now since it's a JavaScript file, I can do whatever I want with it and be able to write JavaScript to my heart's content inside of this file. And in fun fact, you can actually do this in TypeScript files too. So if you are knowledgeable about TypeScript, or you want to switch to using TypeScript because it has different features that is helpful, then you can actually write all of your script in TypeScript now too. And when you compile and sync up your local VS Code to your instance, it will rebuild all of the scripts into proper JavaScript that can run on your instance. And so let's talk, if you've never done normal like Node development or JavaScript development on Node.js, this might be a little bit new to understand, but we'll walk through it right now. So in these JavaScript files that you're using to kind of like inject your scripts into existing ServiceNow files, you basically have this structure of import and then export. Import is basically you're saying, hey, here's the different methods that I will want to use inside of my script. And then export means I want this accessible to scripts inside ServiceNow. And so if we walk back, and that was like the overview. Now, if we drill down a little bit more, if this sounds pre-scripted, it's not. It's absolutely not. I'm just trying to talk through it as I'm doing it. Like I said, this is the first time I pressed the create function on the NOW SDK, so I'm kind of ad-libbing this live. Tell me how I'm doing. But the import part, so notice that in this function, I want to use gs.addInfoMessage. This line cannot exist, and I could still type out gs.addInfoMessage perfectly fine. But my script won't know exactly what that is. Notice like I'm not getting indications of what I should be putting in here. The IntelliSense isn't activating. But the moment I put this back in, did you see how GS turned red? Because it knows now, like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff that you could do with gs.add. Or anything, like all of the GS stuff is loaded now. All this stuff is part of the glide system class for building JavaScript inside ServiceNow. And now, and that existed before Washington, D.C. Like there was plugins for VS Code that did IntelliSense for ServiceNow, and the previous SDK had some similar functionality in that. But this whole idea of building scripts completely separated from your metadata files and having these fields just inject your scripts that you're building is something new in Washington, D.C., and that's what I'm showing right now. Yeah, so this is saying, hey, I'm going to use GS from ServiceNow Glide, and it actually auto-completes too. So if, say, I want to use glide record in here, if I just start typing glide record, there it is, it auto-completes it because it knows where that is in your node modules folder, and it'll include that there. And now if I start building stuff like incident gr equals new glide record to the incident table, and if I start doing stuff with incident, it has all the stuff that you can do for glide record built into here. And all I had to do was import it at the beginning of my script to know that I was going to use it. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And if I take that out, so this is, what does this script do by default? It looks like it just adds a bunch of info messages, and it runs after an update. So I'm going to go ahead and trigger that actually. Didn't I create a record? Oh yeah, here it is. So let me just have it update. I'll trigger an update. Okay, there's the two info messages. And so if I'm in my SDK, all I have to do is go in here and edit it to however I want. I'm going to go ahead and say who was chatting. So Becca was one of the first chats, and then Banglish was the next chat. So I'm going to add those names into there just to demo it. And then it's saved on my local machine. Nothing's happening yet until I build a deployable instance of this application and then upload it into ServiceNow. And how to do that is, I'll show you so fetch pulls the application into my computer. Deploy. Okay, so build and deploy. Where's build? Okay, now SDK build, and then now SDK deploy with the auth of my alias. Okay. So to build the application, it would just be now SDK build. Oh, could not find package. Be sure you're running command in intended directory. Make sure you're in the right folder. So I'm going to close this folder real quick. And I'm going to open because remember when I created the app, I thought it was going to create all the files in my root of Twitch scope test, but it actually created it in whatever example name that I gave it. And I gave it the SNDP-SDK-test, and that's the root folder. So I was opening the previous. So get to the folder that it created for you, and then open that folder. And then now I should be able to do it. Here's my new source file. And then if I open terminal back up, I'm going to say now SDK build. There we go. Now it's working. Oh, it built it. It's fast. It was like one file anyway, so that's why it's so fast. And then now, if I remember, now SDK deploy under the alias of Earlio. And so now it's going to take the application that's on the built application on my local system, and it's going to upload it into my ServiceNow instance, and then record some metrics, and then it's done. So that was pretty fast. All right, so to rehash, so I took this demo function that it built for me, and I edited the add info message to just say Becca and for the first one, and then Benglish for the second one. And I saved it, and then when I go in and build and deploy that update, or the entire application technically, it's going to build it and then immediately deploy it because I combined them into one command. If I go back to the instance and I trigger that business rule, there it goes. And now it says Becca in front of the first one and Benglish on the second one. So that means now that I have business rules and I have other fields that might need updating, or have script fields, schedule jobs, or anything like that, I can actually do all of that scripting inside of this SDK. And I can do it in my own JavaScript files. I can do it in my own TypeScript files and get them updated. That's it. That's how the SDK works. It means I can do all the updates in here without actually doing it inside of the ServiceNow interface. This is really useful for what we're doing for the Twitch stream in building our little bot presence monitor, because that means I can work on this integration when I'm mostly in a different system. I actually don't have to go into ServiceNow at all for a while, and I can just do all the coding from here. So if I stop this, I'm going to back out. I'm going to jump into a different folder. It's called Earlio Instance. So I'm in a different folder now. This is the folder I did to convert a previous app into the SDK. And that one was pretty straightforward too. I can show everybody real quick. So all I did for this one instead was, instead of saying now SDK create, I said now SDK convert, I believe. Right? Yeah, convert. And then I did this similar thing. I gave it a scope name, a package name. If you want to be explicit about the directory it's in, you can actually add that as a parameter. All that's kind of the same stuff, but similar to that. And I just converted an existing app, and then it went in, did what it needed to do to update it to being able to be compatible with the SDK, and I brought it in. And if you ever want to sync up your stuff, make sure to just say now SDK fetch, and I'll actually do that right now. Okay, so now my local system is up to date to what it is in ServiceNow, and you'll see that I actually have a lot more stuff going on in this app because we already started creating other stuff. And then the last thing I made was it operation? Yeah, okay. So I already did a little bit of the scaffolding for this. So I moved the script that we made yesterday from, I moved it out of here and into a new JavaScript file that I have inside of this SDK. Now I can work on it via the SDK. There it is. So here it is. So this is the exact script that y'all probably remember from yesterday if you were watching that one. Hey, thanks. Bye.